Going. Kevin Cleary here with a knife video, and this will be the first time I've done a comparison video, and I actually think the two blades that I want to show you today suit a comparison video really well. What I've got here is the Benchmade Contego and the Spyderco Manix 2 XL. We're going to use our imaginations just a little bit. I'll try to fill in blanks as we go along and pretend that these are standard issue both. So we'll make some comments on this blade, for example, that will pertain to the standard non-black DLC version of this knife, and we'll also make comments about this blade that will pertain to just the Benchmade 810 Contego rather than the 810-1401, which is the KnifeWorks exclusive Contego. So I'm going to use these two blades because it's, in terms of size and shape and usefulness and all that stuff, they're the same. I've been using these knives for a while, and so I can speak, I think, fairly readily to the way they stack up to each other, and hopefully somebody will find this video useful and enjoyable. So let's get into this right off the bat. I'm going to say both of these blades have a very similar philosophy of use. I know I'm borrowing Nut and Fancy's phraseology, but since it works, we're going to use it. Both of these knives I think work well for an EDC knife. Both of these blades work well for an outdoors, bushcraft type knife. I have prepared fire sticks. I have split up and prepared kindling. I have done all the stuff that you'd want to do for most outdoors tasks with these knives, with the exception of skinning any animals. I wouldn't really want to do that with this one. It's just too nice of a blade. This one I just haven't had the opportunity because I have a fixed blade specifically for skinning that hasn't been reviewed or in any videos. It is a nice blade. It's the SOG Huntsman or Woodsman or something like that. Anyway, what I'm suggesting though is that these two blades fit a similar philosophy of use, fit a similar customer therefore, and so there's a very good possibility that someone who's considering a nicer hard use folder / tactical blade would be looking at both of these knives and want to know which one is better and which one they should buy. So that's why I'm going to make this video. I want to start with size and weight. Both of these knives are very similar. The blade length is essentially 4 inches on both of them. The Contego takes it in terms of length by just about 1/8 of an inch, not even, maybe more of a 1/16 of an inch. The Benchmade is just barely longer, okay? So essentially we have 4-inch blades on both of these. Now, if you put them side by side, I'm gonna use the table for comparison. There you go. This is bottom to bottom. You can see the Contego is about 1/2 inch longer overall, so it is a longer knife when open. However, it's much narrower. So if you kind of hold these blades this way, you can see that the Contego has a slimmer profile, and when they're closed, that profile is even more pronounced. So there you go. Think about which you'd rather carry in your pocket. I mentioned that the Manix 2 XL is a very wide knife. It's about 2 inches in this dimension here, while this knife is more like 1.5 inches. So size and weight, they're similar. However, the Benchmade's a little slimmer but longer. This one's slightly shorter and fatter, and it weighs marginally less. Both of these knives come in around 5 ounces, so it's not the end of the world either way. This one I'm going to say is a little thicker in this dimension than this one, but not probably notably so. So that's size and weight. They're almost so close that it's hard to say. It's going to be almost a matter of personal preference whether you'd want this in your pocket. I can tell you when I'm carrying this, in a lot of pockets it ends up sitting on an angle because it's so long that it hits the bottom of your pocket and it's still out. So I kind of rotate it and vary it this much. So this knife is a little, because of its length, it takes up a little extra pocket space. This knife, on the other hand, now it does carry higher. You can see the pocket clip is there, so you've got more knife exposed. However, because of the size of the knife, you almost need that. This one fits a little nicer in pocket when it's clipped in, but it is a little more exposed. So that's a difference you've got to consider. Deeper carry on this option than this one. Now, that's excluding the option of adding an aftermarket clip to either one of these. So If that's what you're going to do, then maybe this is not so much a point to consider. Lanyard hole is maybe a point to consider, since we're kind of looking at the knives like this side by side. The Manix 2 has one and the Contego just doesn't. In the normal Contego, there's also a glass breaker here, which may or may not influence your carry preference. So that's size and weight, and as I say, size and weight pertains primarily to how you're going to carry the knife, so that's why I put all that stuff in that heading. Slightly heavier, but hardly noticeable. Slightly smaller in length, but equal in, probably makes up for that less length in being a thicker knife. So very, very similar, just, let's say, equal in terms of, I can't declare one a winner or a loser, but there may be some things that your personal preference says you'd like one over the other, okay? This is black DLC coated version. Keep in mind that with a normal Benchmade Contego, it's going to be a Cerakoted blade in either gray or black, and the handle's going to be all black. So they would even look very similar. The next thing to consider is the quality or the characteristics of what they're made out of and how those things function. And we'll start with the blade. The blade on the normal Contego is CPM M4, which is not stainless steel, which means it's going to have a coating on it to protect it from rust. This blade is S30V, and it has Spyderco's DLC coating, which in my experience has been the best blade coating I've ever used. It does do better than my Benchmade Barrage, which is also an S30V and has Benchmade's coating. I hate to say it, but the DLC from Spyderco holds up better. That's all there is to it. Whether or not the Cerakote on the Contego would be the same, I don't know. But all I can say is if you're comparing, let's imagine you're comparing the standard issue. This is just going to be plain S30V, no black coating. This is going to be Cerakoted. This one is going to, now in terms of edge retention and usability, they're probably fairly similar, but S30V is going to be considerably better at not rusting, okay? So that's the difference there. And if aesthetically you like that satin finish on your blade, that's not an option with the normal Contego. You'd have to go to this option, which puts it in a totally different price range and lessens the comparison as far as I'm concerned. So in terms of blade steel, I think the edge goes to the Manix 2 with the S30V over the Contego with the CPM M4. Now M4 is going to be a tough steel. It's going to be hard use, no question. And the Cerakoting, it's just going to be a question of how well that holds up. If you're planning to use it for an outdoor use, if you're going to be starting fires using fire steel, that kind of thing, then keep in mind that a coated blade, you're going to have to kind of wear that coating off of a certain spot in order to get your sparking to happen properly. Blade shape itself is very different. Now this is a full flat grind leaf shape blade or modified drop point blade. This is, of course, is a partial flat grind or a high flat grind in the reverse Tonto. Now both of these knives slice pretty well, but when it comes to fruit preparation, when it comes to slashing ability, there's no doubt the edge goes to the Manix. When it comes to strength and piercing or stabbing strength and the chances of breaking your knife, the edge goes to the Contego. So again, similar but different. The full flat grind is very good. It's extremely useful in any kind of cutting task you could come up with. I have never had any problems with this blade, let's say that though. It's not like I go to cut something with this knife, and I've cut a lot of things with it, and say, oh man, I wish I had my Manix or my Para 2 or some other Spyderco with a full flat grind. No. Just technically speaking, the full flat grind is going to be a little better slicer. It's a thinner profile than the Contego. You can see the blade thickness on the two of them side by side. It is thinner. It is wider. This is sort of a heavy, thick, tough type of blade shape, and it's designed to be that way. So they're different. It'll be up to you to decide which one you like better. Frankly, I really like both, and would give the edge to different ones depending on what application I was going to be using. This one would not slice quite as well as this one. This one could break at the tip easier than this one. So there you go. Depends on what you're looking for in terms of blade shape. Now I think that's about all I need to say about the blade. If you have any specific questions about that, go ahead and put a comment at the bottom of this video. Let's talk about deployment, because both of these deploy very well and use a very similar locking mechanism. However, you should know that if I release the lock on both, no, I didn't pull it far enough back on this one, so now it's released. This will be in the outtakes. I'm not editing it. Both of them will, okay, here it's fully released. Notice I need to shake it a little bit. This one just drops. Now, I have to say this right at this point. I have watched a couple of other videos where they were talking about polishing and smoothing out the action on these exact two knives. And it was exactly the opposite. The Contego was tighter and wouldn't drop close like that. The Manix would. Now, that's going to be just a crapshoot, okay? Both of these knives with a little bit of TLC will deploy extremely smoothly, and certainly if I took this one apart and polished some things up and oiled it a little bit, it would close a little better than it does. It's very tight right now. It's tight. When I deploy it, it's tight. I can close it and I can open it quickly, but you just need to know that it doesn't deploy quite as smoothly as the Contego at this point. Now, I'm going to suggest that, as I said, with a little bit of love and a little bit of care, both of these could deploy almost the same, with this one exception. The Manix is a very, very stiff lock. The actuation of the locks is the same, right? The difference is the Benchmade, you can actuate with one finger. The Manix, no. You're going to have to use two hands on it, and there's no same when you close it. It's going to need two fingers. So you just need to know that. They're very similar, of course. They're both the sliding. It's the ball bearing, cage ball bearing lock versus the axis lock. And this is an ongoing debate. I'm not going to get into it too much there, other than to say this. The ball bearing lock is slightly stiffer and a little more positive. The lockup is extremely positive. Okay? It's very strong, very stiff. You know when it locks into place. The axis lock, because of the difference in the tension on those springs and with the way you access the little bolt there, is a little easier to actuate with one finger. It does, you know, let's be honest. Now we're talking about closing the knife, which is not like once it's time to close your knife, that means, you know, if there was some emergency going on, it's over. It's not a fair comparison other than your own, you know, preference. Are you going to be sitting around flipping these things open a whole bunch? If you are, then maybe you're going to care a great deal about how that lockup works. You just need to know that in my case, the Benchmade's a little smoother. The axis lock, now this is not subjective, this is objective. The axis lock is easier to actuate. There's no debate about that. However, mechanically and engineering wise, the ball bearing lock is probably a slightly stronger lock, although so close that it's hardly worth talking about. So that's lockup. Let's talk about the handles. Both of these handles are partially open. You can see just opposite ends. This one is a backspacer at the top. This one's a backspacer at the bottom. This one is going to have a glass breaker on it, which this one will never have. Both of these are steel liners. Both of the liners are skeletonized. And it's interesting that both of these have jimping on the handles in similar places. So hope you can see that. A little more on the Contego. The Manix 2 has it right here where my finger's moving as well. You just can't see it on the camera. There's also jimping on the back. Again, more on the Contego than on the Manix. However, what I'm going to say about these is both of these handles are very, very grippy, but they achieve it in different ways. The Manix is a slightly more aggressive G10. The Benchmade is a slightly rubbery G10. So, both very grippy, but different. There's a bit of give to this one. There's no give at all to this one. Now, here's something that I'm going to say the Manix does just a little bit better. The shape of this handle locks the knife into your hand more than the shape of this handle does. The shape of this handle is a little straighter, and it makes up for, it adds to the grippiness of the knife by, you know, texturing the handle. If there was no texturing on both of these handles, this would be, you'd get a stronger grip on this one. Because of the grip, because of the texturing, they end up close to equal, but you need to know the shape itself is a little stronger in this one. You can see there's a significant thumb ramp. You can see there's a finger choil at the front. Here, there's no thumb ramp. There is a ramp here. The choil is not so much a choil as it is a cutout. Both are good, no question. I love both of these knives. Both of them are extremely ergonomic, extremely comfortable. This one is a little stronger in terms of when I hold on to this, if you were to, you know, get a vise, let's say, and clamp it onto the handle and start pulling me up off the ground, which one could I hang on to longer? This one. Okay, so that needs to be noted in your consideration of these two blades. The lock mechanism we've already spoken to. The fit and finish on both of these is fantastic. Spyderco and Benchmade, both outstanding companies. You know, people comment on the sharpness of Benchmade's. I know people complain about that. This one came razor, razor, razor sharp. I cannot complain at all about the factory sharpness on either one of these blades. However, here's what I've got to say about that. If you are a person who's going to use a knife all the time and carry a knife all the time, you're probably pretty proficient at sharpening. And if you're not, you need to get proficient at sharpening, because it doesn't matter how sharp or dull a knife comes from the factory, it's going to get dull if you use it, and you're going to have to get it back to a good edge. So that isn't the end of the world. Both of these knives are going to come very sharp. It's going to be up to you as the end user to keep them that way. And both of the blade steels are probably going to be similar. They're both rated to a similar hardness on a Rockwell scale. You know, we could debate back and forth, and there's even going to be a degree of personal preference in terms of sharpening various kinds of steel and which we prefer. Everybody knows a softer steel is going to sharpen easier. There's not a big enough difference in the hardness of these steels in their initial versions. Now, in this variation, this is M390 and this is S30V. This one is a little bit harder, a little bit higher end steel, but this isn't a fair comparison because this knife costs a lot more than this one. And this knife costs especially a lot more than the standard Manix 2, which brings us to the last point. You go on Amazon.com or KnifeWorks or Blade HQ, and you're going to look for one of these knives to buy. I've got to tell you, the Manix 2 XL is probably one of the greatest values on the market right now. It's a big knife. It's S30V blade steel, and it's a great company. It's Spyderco, and without the black DLC coating, this knife can be had for like $100, like $105. You might even find it for $95 somewhere if you were really lucky. I'm not going to give you any. I'll leave that effort to you. However, the Benchmade Contego, you can look on eBay. You can look wherever you want to look. Sorry about that motorcycle going by. You're not going to find a Contego in its standard form for much less than $175. You may find one for $165 or something if there's a special discount, but this is a more expensive knife. Now, in the black DLC, and since the standard Contego comes in either black or gray, they're a little more comparable because this guy may run you $140 or so. I didn't pay that for this. I got a good deal on it. But they're a little closer. Still, you're paying more for the Benchmade. Okay, part of that is name, part of that is marketing. You know, the whole thing. I'm going to say Spyderco does have fairly aggressive pricing on a lot of their blades, and the Manix is especially good because I'm going to say this is every bit as useful and nice and enjoyable to use as the Para 2, and yet it can be had for like what, $20 less than the Para 2 in just the standard configuration. If you're comparing like to like, standard Para 2 is going to be $130, standard Manix 2 XL is going to be $105. So the Manix is a pretty good deal in terms of price. So there you go. That's the comparison between the two. I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you find it somewhat helpful. And there's a good look at the two blades side by side as sort of a finish off. both sides of the blade. I personally love both of these blades and a lot of the blades I have. It's a debate for me every it's a debate for me every day which knife to carry. Both great knives. I don't think you're going to go wrong with either one, but at least now you know some of the differences, and that may help you make your decision. Talk to you later, YouTube.